By the late 12th century, the Crusader Kingdom of Jerusalem was a house divided, held together by fragile truces and a landscape of shifting alliances. To the south, Egypt was no longer a fractured neighbor. To the north, Syria had found its center. Both were now under the singular, iron-willed command of Saladin. Saladin had achieved what the Frankish lords feared most: the unification of the Muslim world. He sat at the center of a vast Ayyubid empire, waiting for a reason to strike at the heart of the Christian occupation. That reason was provided by Raynald of Chatillon. Raynald, the lord of Ultra-Jordan, was a man whose cruelty was matched only by his recklessness. Operating from the formidable fortress of Karak, he ignored the standing treaties between King Guy of Jerusalem and Saladin. In early 1187, Raynald attacked a massive Muslim caravan traveling from Cairo to Damascus. It was a violation of the highest order. Thousands were taken prisoner, and the wealth of the caravan was seized. When Saladin demanded the return of the prisoners and the stolen goods, Raynald refused. The spark had been struck. Saladin declared a holy war, summoning a massive army from every corner of his empire: Kurdish cavalry, Turkish horse archers, and Egyptian infantry, a force numbering nearly 30,000 men. In June 1187, Saladin crossed the Jordan River. His strategy was one of psychological and tactical baiting. He laid siege to the city of Tiberias, located on the shores of the Sea of Galilee. He knew that the Crusader nobility could not allow one of their major cities to fall without a response. The Crusaders gathered their strength at the springs of Sepphoris. It was the largest army the Kingdom of Jerusalem had ever assembled, approximately 20,000 men, including 1,200 heavy knights. Among them were the fanatical military orders, the Knights Templar and the Knights Hospitaller. On the night of July 2nd, the Crusader leaders met in a council of war. Raymond III, Count of Tripoli, whose own wife was trapped within the walls of Tiberias, urged caution. He knew the terrain. He knew the heat. "Do not march," Raymond warned. "Between here and Tiberias lies a waterless plateau. If we leave the springs of Sepphoris, we are walking into a furnace. Let Saladin come to us. Here we have the water. There we have only the sun." But the king, Guy of Lusignan, was a weak man surrounded by hawks. Raynald of Chatillon and the Grand Master of the Templars, Gerard de Riedfort, accused Raymond of cowardice. They argued that a Christian king must protect his people with the sword, not wait behind a spring. Driven by pride and a fear of appearing weak, King Guy gave the order. At dawn, the army would march. The march began on July 3rd. It was a journey of only 9 miles, but in the blistering heat of a Galilean summer, it was a gauntlet of agony. The Crusaders moved in 3 divisions. The infantry, clad in thick padded gambesons and carrying heavy shields, marched on the flanks to protect the cavalry's horses from the constant rain of arrows. Saladin's horse archers hovered like a dark cloud, never fully engaging, but never ceasing their fire. They moved in hit-and-run patterns, thinning the Crusader ranks and forcing the army to stop and regroup every few hundred yards. By midday, the heat was intolerable. The dust raised by 20,000 pairs of boots choked the men. Their water skins were empty. The wells along the route had been filled with sand or poisoned by Saladin's scouts. As the afternoon wore on, the rear guard, the Templars and Hospitallers, became bogged down under the weight of the Muslim attacks. King Guy, seeing the exhaustion of his troops and the slowing of the columns, made the most catastrophic decision of the campaign. He ordered the army to halt and set up camp on the dry, volcanic plateau near the Horns of Hattin. They were still miles from the water of the Sea of Galilee. The night of July 3rd was a psychological horror. The Crusaders were trapped on a waterless ridge, surrounded by the campfires of Saladin's army. The Muslim forces were well supplied. Camels brought skins of fresh water up from the lake, and the sounds of the water being poured into troughs echoed through the night air, torturing the thirsty Christians. To add to the misery, Saladin ordered his men to set fire to the dry scrub and grass that covered the plateau. The wind shifted, blowing thick, acrid smoke and the heat of the brushfires directly into the Crusader camp. Men lay on their shields, their throats swollen and eyes stinging, listening to the rhythmic chanting of the Muslim soldiers and the beating of drums. There was no sleep. There was only the realization of the trap. At dawn, the sun rose like a hammer. The Crusaders, desperate and demoralized, broke camp with one goal: to reach the springs of Hattin. But Saladin was ready. He had positioned his forces to block every path to the water. As the Crusaders attempted to move, the Muslim cavalry launched a full-scale assault. The Christian infantry, crazed by thirst and blinded by the smoke of the fires, lost their discipline. They broke away from the knights, charging toward the lake in a disorganized mass. They were cut down in the thousands. Many were driven over the cliffs, others simply surrendered for a drop of water. The knights, now abandoned by their infantry, were forced to retreat to the slopes of the Horns of Hattin. They were the elite of the Crusader world, and even in their dehydrated state, they fought with a terrifying, desperate strength. King Guy ordered his red tent to be pitched on the summit of the Horns, a final rallying point. The knights launched two massive, uphill charges, aiming directly for Saladin's own position. For a moment, the Muslim lines wavered. Saladin's own son would later record that he saw the Sultan pull at his beard in anxiety as the Frankish knights thundered toward them. But the horses were dying of thirst, and the knights were outnumbered 10-1. The Muslim forces closed the circle. The focal point of the battle was the True Cross. Carried into battle by the Bishop of Acre, the relic was the spiritual heart of the army. When the Muslim cavalry finally broke through the guard and seized the cross, the last of the Christian morale collapsed. The king's tent was kicked down. The knights, too exhausted to lift their swords, fell to their knees. The battle, and the kingdom, was lost. In the aftermath, the high-ranking captives were brought to Saladin's tent. Among them were King Guy and Reynaud of Chatillon. The king was trembling with thirst. Saladin, showing the chivalry for which he would become famous, handed Guy a bowl of water cooled with snow from Mount Hermon. Guy drank and then passed the bowl to Reynaud. Saladin stopped him. "You give him the water," Saladin said through an interpreter. "I do not. He does not have my protection." Saladin then confronted Reynaud, listing his many crimes and his betrayals of the truces. When Reynaud remained defiant, Saladin drew his sword and struck the lord's head from his shoulders, fulfilling the oath he had made months earlier. The common soldiers were taken into slavery. The Templars and Hospitallers, however, were given a different choice. Saladin viewed the military orders as the most dangerous elements of the Crusader states, men who would never stop fighting. He ordered their execution. The Battle of Hattin was a total catastrophe for the Crusader states. With their army annihilated, there was no one left to man the walls of the cities. Acre, Nazareth, Jaffa, and Ascalon fell in rapid succession. On October 2, 1187, less than 3 months after the battle, Jerusalem itself surrendered to Saladin. The sound of the bells was replaced by the call to prayer. While the Third Crusade would eventually bring Richard the Lionheart to the Holy Land to reclaim the coast, the heart of the kingdom was gone. The Horns of Hattin stood as a silent witness to the day when arrogance, heat, and a brilliant sultan brought an end to the first century of the Crusades.